Yes. Okay. Wonderful. Good morning, everyone. It's such a pleasure to have all of you join us for this edition of the India-Japan Forum. Over the next 35 odd hours, we will discuss key strategic themes, which will all be off the record. Please note that the conversation with Dr. S. Jaishankar will be on the record. And for all participants using the translation device, please note channel 1 is for English and channel 2 is for Japanese. I would like to now invite Rajan Navani, Chairman, Ananta Center, Chairman and Managing Director, Jetline Group of Companies, and Founder, CEO, Jet Synthesis, to inaugurate the forum.
Thank you, and a very, very good morning and a warm welcome to everyone to the third India-Japan Forum. You know, having built on the foundations of the first two, I believe the third is always very significant. It is a time to take off and to really add many more years of a fulfilling agenda and partnership, which is very future-looking. So again, on that high note, a very warm welcome to all of you. It is truly an honor for us to have with us here Dr. Jaishankar, the Honorable Minister for External Affairs, whose both partnership as well as support to this forum and to Ananta has been immeasurable. It is under his unwavering guidance that the Ministry of External Affairs has also partnered with us here today for this event. He has truly put India at the center stage in the world, and I think this is a time, again, as I mentioned, for us to see how we can really take this relationship to its next level. I'm also very pleased to welcome a very rich Japanese delegation. We have Mr. Nobimutsu Hayashi-san, the Governor of the Japan Bank for International Cooperation. Very warm welcome to you. Vice Minister Takehiko Matsuo-san, welcome. Ambassador Keiichi Ono-san, and many distinguished participants, both from India and Japan. And we truly hope that we'll make these next 35 hours, as was mentioned, a very meaningful discussion around, I would say, new issues that will actually set the agenda for the future. So if you see the way we have structured this today, it is to be able to create and open up discussions around areas which are very important for countries like India and Japan to collaborate on, because I think one thing we all realize is that the potential of this relationship is a lot more than what we have been able to achieve. And I think the ability for us to unlock those areas and to see how we can take those issues forward through a forum like this is something that we truly look forward to, and encourage each one of you to participate and engage in some of these discussions as we move forward. I would also like to mention that we are looking at an era or a time when technology particularly, and you see AI, semiconductors, geopolitics, strategy, defense, everything actually is converging around specific agendas and issues. And the ability for us to not only take specific initiatives that will deepen specific areas, but also take a holistic umbrella kind of a discussion forward is something that is a truly opportunistic thing for us to do through this forum. So encourage each one of you to participate in that manner. Before I invite Dr. Jaishankar and Indrani to take this conversation and to open up this forum, I also want to let everybody know that today is our CEO Indrani Bakchi's birthday, and we are all here, and I would love to wish her a very happy birthday. And I think, as we were discussing, it is something that Indrani, please, we have a small bouquet for you. She has put a lot of effort to put this together. I think each one of you knows her personally, and we wish you a very happy year ahead. So over to Indrani and Dr. Jaishankar. Very warm welcome to all of you. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you very much for being here today. A special welcome to Dr. Jaishankar. Thank you so much for being such a support for our forums and all the work that we do. The relationship between India and Japan is not just special, it has acquired layers over the years, and you've been here for our last session, our last forum as well. And I was just wondering if I could sort of ask you to cast your mind over the last year. And since we all love lists, you think of 5 interesting good things that have happened between India and Japan in the last year, since we last spoke at this forum.
Well, first of all, let me join the others in wishing you. On your question, let's say 5 things which have happened in the last year, 5 positive things. I would say, to me, one, we have this discussion underway with our Japanese colleagues about how do we create a solid human resource base for the relationship. There's a big target, ambitious target we are working on. And the idea really is whether, through a combination of more students, more, mobile talent, more corporate internships, training, can we actually create a base of people who can service this relationship? This discussion today is underway. It was initiated by the Japanese side. We are obviously very interested. And I actually probably see that right now as the most interesting possibility, because I think one of the constraints for the relationship has always been a lack of people, who are deployable, who are conversant with each other's countries, because there is still, I would say, we haven't developed at a societal, systemic level the kind of understanding and bonding and comfort that we should have. A second area I would pick would be actually defense and security. Because it's a difficult, between any 2 countries, it's not normally an early area of cooperation, because you need a high degree of trust and understanding to do something in defense. We've had, I think, this year progress on a particular system we are working for with the Navy called Unicorn. We actually had exercises where Japanese military, self-defense personnel were present in India. So when I look at the kind of policy exchanges and now beginning to move into technology and products, that's a evolution which is an important one. Third, in terms of business, because that's at the core of our relationship, I think there too we've had some sort of good steps, big steps. One I would point to is the Toyota-Kirloskar, collaboration has become much bigger. Another one is the Nippon Steel ArcelorMittal project. So we are actually seeing a kind of a scaling up of business. So these are businesses already in India who are doubling down or more on their presence. the fourth, which is really more of a trend, but I think offers a lot of possibility, is, Japan is today revitalizing its semiconductor sector. And India, after a very long period of neglect, actually is also, we've announced a semiconductor mission. There are a lot of things which are happening. It's interesting, both of us also happen to be working with Taiwan. There are, to me, I'm seeing the beginnings of something potentially important here and potentially really significant for both countries. Now, normally I would say, okay, it's just beginning, so would it really rate being in that list of 5? Normally I would say no, but I would in this case make an exception, because I think this is such a vital field, which is going to be so important in a way for in a way really I would say the balances geopolitical level equations in this coming decade, that the makings of a semiconductor collaboration to me would be up there. And finally, to me, in a sense, I hear much more discussion and interest and initiatives actually from organizations and people who've been involved in the relationship, which is really at one level some dissatisfaction that we haven't, why is it we have not been able to do more, but also some determination that we want to do more. So we've had we've had an industry level initiative saying, okay, what can we do to increase training, language skills. I think that's something which is useful. We ourselves in India are reforming our higher education system. I think we are more open to universities. We are more open to having our students go out, other students come in, collaborative campuses. So to me, this ferment today, this desire really to improve, to enhance the quality of the relationship would be the last one.
So it's interesting what you just said, because what it means is from the stratospheric level of government and high strategy, we are moving to a much more people-to-people part and more company-to-company part of the relationship. And that will take some doing, obviously, because there is a language issue here, and that we should be able to overcome fairly if we are determined about this. But if you are looking at the flip side of this relationship, what are the 3 challenges that you might encounter, or that we might encounter, and how do we guard against that?
Well, Indrani, I think the main challenge, in a way, you have yourself implied. We've never had problems between India and Japan.
No.
But not having problems doesn't mean everything works well. Not having problems can also be we're both being happy in the same room, but it stays there. So we need something more. So I would say, how do you take good sentiment and make it into a practical plan? I think it's that journey which has been a challenge for the relationship. And the kind of things that I described to you, which is really a deepening of business, more interest in, as I say, in education, in internships. I feel tourism, again. When I look today at the kind of spike in Indian tourists. We are in India, I mean, for the benefit of our Japanese colleagues, I must tell you, the foreign ministry issues the passport. So I have a good sense of how many passports we issue every year. And our passport issual is going up actually at the rate of almost 10 to 15% a year. And we are issuing pretty much between about 13 million to 15 million passports every year. And these are 10-year validity, so you can imagine accumulated what it's doing. In this country, foreign travel is growing. Interest in foreign tourism is growing. But we haven't yet seen any of this really directed at Japan. If you look at Southeast Asia today, look at Singapore, Malaysia, Thailand, look at the Gulf, look at Europe, Indian tourists are really going there in very, very large numbers. So this, how that part of it, as I said, good sentiment, not yet, doesn't automatically translate into practical activity. That is challenge number one. Challenge number two, the supporting activities, more tourism, more education, that, and even incoming tourists is, we are not seeing that kind of numbers yet. And I would say, in a way, for me, the third issue is a belief that the government, somehow governments are going to build this relationship. Now, governments can lead this relationship, they can shape the relationship. But if you look at all the other big relationships that have changed for us, look at the American relationship, look at the Australian relationship, look at the Gulf relationship. They've also changed because, the government has given the signal, but there's a huge societal kind of backup which has happened. And if this relationship needs that kind of backup. And that's really when we can actually get it moving.
You need a nuclear deal, basically.
Some equivalent.
Well, a big ticket agreement between India.
No, not necessarily. Everything doesn't happen with a big bang. I think often you can get, even that I would argue is a bit overstated. I mean, if you ask me, she's referring to the nuclear deal with America, which we did, which was a turning point in the relationship. But I would argue that H-1B was actually as impactful as the nuclear deal, and in many ways much more long-lasting than the nuclear deal. Which is not to say the nuclear deal wasn't a huge achievement. Relationships do not develop necessarily through quantum jumps. Okay, they can also develop layer by layer, bit by bit, things happening. And I think we have not looked in the past when we say, okay, we need better relations with Japan, everybody says, oh, that means more investment. Answer is yes. But just saying, there should be more investment, A, doesn't make that investment happen. And B, even if some of that happens, isn't good enough. I think we need the rest of the supporting activities. And there are models. When I look at Japan's relationship with Southeast Asia, when I look at Japan's relationship with its own neighbors in Northeast Asia, I think there are lessons for us that when I look at the kind of student numbers from those countries, when I look at the number of tourists from those countries, look at the number of flights from those countries, hotels from those countries, those are all, missing pieces in our relationship.
And that's, what you said about not having a problem in the relationship is not a driver of the relationship. It
Absolutely.
Doesn't drive
Yes.
the relationship.
In fact, I would, in some ways, it's a negative.
Yes, it is. It's because once you have a problem, you look for a solution, and that has other implications. That's actually an interesting view. Of course, we will. Everybody is looking at the elections in the U.S. and how they will. How that will have implications for other parts of the world. In your view, what would be the implication of a Trump presidency 2.0 on, say, the Quad. And while we are at it, sometimes you hear a narrative in Japan about India being the weak link in the Quad. Why can we dispel such a notion?
Your first question, how would a Trump administration look at the Quad? The Quad this time actually was restarted by the Trump administration. In fact, 2017, it was the first year of the Trump administration when it started at a vice minister's level. Then in 2019, it was again under the Trump administration that it moved from the vice minister's level to the foreign minister's level. In 2020, when there was almost a global lockdown, one of the few physical diplomatic meetings which took place in the calendar year 2020 was actually a Quad meeting in Tokyo. So if I were to go by the past record, in fact, I would argue that the Trump administration deserves a lot of the credit for the takeoff of the Quad in its second incarnation. And and the fact that the Quad has since advanced would only validate their judgment. And there is every reason for us to expect that, they would say, we got it right the first time, it's done well, and therefore we should keep with it. I think that's a reasonable extrapolation from where they started. In many ways, most of us are conversant with President Trump's views about alliances and, America's share and burden sharing and things like that. Now, those concerns and those arguments actually don't apply to the Quad at all.
Yes.
Because, Quad is a kind of everybody pays their fair share. So it's like everybody goes for dinner and you split the bill and everybody thinks it's the right thing to do. So if one looks at some of the concerns which President Trump has articulated in terms of America's commitments and why is America doing so much, that doesn't apply to Quad. In fact, Quad is a kind of model which is very comfortable with a much more everybody pays their share outlook of international engagement. On your second question, look, what has happened in the Quad is there are many debates which happen in the Quad, which happens, four countries with four different histories. You agree on some things, you don't agree on some things. Often what happens is when you don't agree on an issue, then another country would come and say, that country is a weak link. In our country, very frankly, people have said Japan is the weak link at times. There were times when the administration transitioned in the United States. Nobody was initially sure how the transition would affect the Quad. And remember, Australia was the country which in the initial round of Quad, we felt the Australians pulled the plug on Quad and the Australians felt they should pull the plug before we pulled the plug on Quad. Some of these happens. I think today we are beyond that phase. I don't think there is a weak link in the Quad at all. In fact, it's very interesting if you ask, let us say somebody like Mike Pompeo, saying, okay, at the end of your tenure as Secretary of State, tell me 4 or 5 big achievements, he would put Quad one of them. I suspect if you ask Tony Blinken the same question next month, he'll probably give you the same answer. So the fact is today, meeting by meeting, quarter by quarter, year by year, level by level, Quad is actually growing. You look at the agenda of Quad, it's actually one of the most expansive sort of intergovernmental coordination that is today in evidence.
Before I open it up for a couple of questions from the audience, I wanted to ask you two things that we think about. First, what if you had to explain our current China relationship to Japan, particularly in the wake of the agreement that we've just got to restore patrolling after the conflict in Galwan. How would you do that? And I think we can start it.
And beyond it? Okay, all right. Look, in a way, India and Japan do share the attribute of both being neighbors of China. We are a land neighbor, you are a maritime neighbor, but neighbors are neighbors. We've had our experiences. I mean, in a way you could argue every experience is unique, but for every experience also has, lessons for everybody else, which is why we all watch international relations. That we assess from every experience and every relationship what is the learning for other countries. In our particular case, we had stable relationship with China. It was growing in many respects. In terms of trade, it was very, very substantial. It still is very substantial. There had been a certain amount of investment, mostly from China to India. There were some issues we have which you don't have, which is a very imbalanced trade. We've had a lot of market access issues in China. Japanese companies don't face it to the same degree, and trade figures, the trade balances are very different for Japan. But our entire relationship with China was predicated on the fact that the border areas would remain peaceful and stable. And then in 2020, and we had agreements to ensure that. In 2020, for some reason, which is still a matter of speculation, the Chinese chose to bring a lot of forces to the border areas. And obviously we responded with counter deployments, and then we had an incident in which a number of soldiers got killed, and obviously this impacted the relationship. So it has taken us 4.5 years to actually negotiate the disengagement of forces, which is really the fact that the militaries are too close at some places along the line of actual control. We have still challenges left with us. I mean, I made a statement in Parliament on this subject, and we still have to de-escalate, because what we have done is disengage forces from close proximity, but we have a de-escalation because there's still a very large number of forces. But there are, big issues and question marks which have raised, and it has impacted the entire relationship. So now we have to sit down and discuss with China, how do we, in a sense, rebuild our relationship, and that is an exercise that still has to be undertaken.
Before I open up to the audience, we have something else that we want to do, which is we have a video message from your counterpart in Tokyo. So Takashi Iwaya-san very kindly sent us a video message for the forum, for which we are immensely grateful. And I would like to play the message right now.
Namaskar, konnichiwa. 外務大臣の岩谷武です。ジャイシャンカル外相、アナンタセンターの皆様、ご列席の皆様、日本政府を代表して第3回日印フォーラムの開催をお祝い申し上げます。このフォーラムは2021年以来、両国の幅広い分野の専門家が活発に議論を交わす場として、 日印関係の大きな潜在性を具体化させるためにその役割を果たしてきました。今回のフォーラムでも二国間の伝統的な協力分野に加え AI といった新しい分野の議題も含まれています。本年で10周年を迎える特別戦略的グローバルパートナーシップの一層の強化に向けて有益な議論が行われることを期待しています。日本とインドは法の支配や民主主義といった基本的価値と戦略的利益を共有するパートナーであり、インド太平洋地域の平和と安定に大きな責任を負っています。先日もイタリアでの G7 外相会合の際にジャイシャンカル外相と会談を行い、自由で開かれたインド太平洋の実現に向けた協力を確認しました。日米豪印を通じた実践的な協力も着実に成果を上げています。このような同志国による連携をさらに進めていく考えです。また、日印両国が国際社会の平和と繁栄に貢献していく基盤として、二国間関係の強化も重要です。安全保障分野では、重層的な共同訓練が行われています。また、艦艇搭載用の複合アンテナ、ユニコーンの移転に向けた協議も進められています。この分野での連携を一層強化するため、両国の安全保障協力の指針となっている共同宣言の改定を進めてまいります。経済面でも、対印、官民投融資5兆円目標の達成に向けて着実な進展が見られます。また、現地の日本企業がインドを拠点として将来の成長が期待できるアフリカなどの第三国への輸出にも取り組んでいます。こうした日本企業の活動を日本政府としても支援することで、Make in India, Make for World に貢献し、両国のみならず、世界の成長と繁栄に向けて協働していきたいと思います。さらに、二国間の中長期的な柱として、人的交流も重要です。この分野は大きなポテンシャルを有する分野です。両国の官民が知恵を出し合い、取り組みを拡大させていきたいと考えています。最後に、本日の日印フォーラムの成功と皆様のさらなるご活躍を記念し、私の挨拶とさせていただきます。ダニアワード、ご清聴ありがとうございました。
Well, clearly, two foreign ministers are thinking alike because he could have almost been talking like you. So, at least at that
He was talking like me.
at your level, certainly there is so much of convergence. I think there is a reason for us to work harder. And one of the things that you spoke about earlier, where it comes to people, where it comes to education, internships, manufacturing, a key element of that is mobility. We have mobility agreements with a couple of other key partners, particularly, say, Germany. But one of the things that we don't have with Japan is a mobility arrangement.
No, we actually have a mobility arrangement. It's called special skill worker SSW arrangement, but it hasn't really taken off in any meaningful manner. I think this is going to be a very important subject in the coming days for two reasons. One, actually in terms of, the Japanese, not just Japanese, we are seeing it across the world. We're seeing it in Europe. It was, I would say, one of the main subjects of discussion when Chancellor Scholz was here. In fact, the Germans increased the mobility, the specialized skill visas every year from 20,000 to 90,000 a year because their companies need those skills. So one issue even on the areas which we have already agreed on, which is, let us say, health, or in many ways I would say a medium skill sectors. I think Japan has demands for workers, for professionals, and it's a question of where they choose to source it from. And obviously, India has a possibility which has not yet been effectively explored. But to my mind, the second one is much more, in a sense, strategically significant, which is in many areas, if you look at the semiconductor industry as an example, but even I would say when we look at AI, there is going to be a lot of mobility which will be associated with the growth of AI and with the growth of digital businesses. Now, the United States has been very aggressive on this. And we've also had actually the reverse of mobility. We have mobility of enterprises coming into India. That today there are close to almost 2,000 global capability centers in India, set up in India by foreign companies. Yes. And some of them are very big. I mean, they employ tens of thousands of people. And there was a study which said that their exports alone today account for close to $150 billion. So you are going to have, to some extent, enterprise mobility into India and talent mobility out of India. And I think the crucial technology relationships which we are going to have in India will have, are going to be the ones where this kind of mobility is factored into the arrangement. And certainly that has been our experience with US and Europe. And we hope that it will be a conversation with Japan as well.
Well, certainly it's a disruptive force as well, this entire movement. As I said, if you could raise your hands for questions, but while we are waiting for the first question, if you sort of put on your thinker's hat, what's your longer view? What's your longer term view of Japan, of the relationship? But also, if we, given what we've just spoken about in the last half an hour, what would you say would be our short-term imperatives to get the show on the road, kind of thing?
I would say, in terms of the longer term, sometimes you can think ahead by thinking back. When I think back at the history of Asia for the last 150 years, I don't think any country has done more to shape the modernization of Asia than Japan has done. It did it first by modernizing itself, then by having that impact in the countries around its immediate periphery. It was a crucial factor in the modernization and growth of the ASEAN nations. So there is in a way, impact and influence and almost a driving force in Japan, which is historically there. The record is there, the evidence is there. I mean, sometimes, when I look at it, I'm not sure in Japan itself people necessarily understand that or recall that or fully appreciate it. So there is therefore a larger, I would say, contribution that Japan has made and can continue to make. So when I look today at, in this region, the Indian subcontinent, if India and the Indian subcontinent are actually to make that big jump out there, which can be the crucial partners, because there is such a strong record and because, Japan is a country which has no political downside in this, especially in this region. It is only regarded positively in this region. I think there's a natural attraction to this partnership. It's also, in a broader way, I would say it's important that Japan play a bigger role in world politics, in the region's security and well-being, because if an important player, if a very substantial player doesn't make their full contribution, then what happens is the whole equation gets a little bit distorted. Then there is, at the end of the day, there is a diversity in the world and a balance which comes out of that diversity. So if everybody does their best and makes the fullest contribution, that balance is a very natural balance. If any country, for whatever reason, holds itself back a bit, then, somebody else benefits or there is a different result. So we definitely welcome, a much more active Japan, a much more visible Japan, Japan which takes on more responsibilities, which has a greater presence, Japan with which we can partner in, as my counterpart, Minister Iwai said, I mean, not just in this region, even in places like Africa. And to my mind, they all go together, the bilateral relationship, what we do at a regional level, what we do at a global level. Remember, we are also G4 countries. We are the 4 countries who are seeking permanent membership of the Security Council. So even at that level, there's an aspiration, and we will realize it only when we help each other in that process.
Thank you. Can I invite questions, comments from the floor? Mr. Bauer.
Can you hear me? Hi, thank you for your comments this morning. Ernie Bauer from the U.S. I wonder what you think the prospects are for a greater development of the economic engagement within the Quad. I mean, can you imagine the Quad agreeing to open arteries of mobility, money, and ideas between the 4 Quad countries? And if so, what would that look like?
Can we take a couple more questions, because the Minister has a hard stop at economic.
Thank you very much. I have a question on the relationship between India and Japan. As you know, that our FDI has increased substantially to China, to ASEAN particularly, but flat for India. And one of the things I have heard from investors is that the labor regulations in India is extremely onerous. Of course, the Prime Minister has improved upon that, but it hasn't been effectively implemented. And the challenge with India is that you have a lot of people, but you have a scale issue. How much of a priority is unshackling this burden, the cholesterol artery of manufacturing in India? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Trin. Shriparna.
Thank you, sir. I have a question with regards to the Quad. Very often, at least in the academic circles, there's no clarity on what exactly is the Quad doing, where is it headed. It's generally written off, saying that, it's not really going to make any sort of impact. So what is Quad doing? Why is there so much confusion regarding it?
Go ahead. Is there any other question that please?
Thank you, because I think for the last 3 questions we mentioned about, the other speaker mentioned about the economic field and about relations. But as mentioned by the 2 speaker, that we mentioned about the people-to-people relation, especially in the education field. And I'm also a professor, and I'm really interested in how to enhance the opportunity for students of India, Japan, and also my country, which I'm going to present later on, but now the time for me to raise a question. How can we do something great, really a base, because you are the leader for the student, young generation, if Japan and India and Southeast Asia country, especially Vietnam. Thank you.
Thank you. I think you can.
The first question, can I imagine a more economic Quad, economically active Quad? Absolutely. I can imagine pretty much anything with Quad because it's actually been so nimble, so responsive, such an open architecture, and nobody, people, none of the four countries have come with a rigid, this is what we are going to do. In a way that answers the later question which is asked. People, have come to the Quad meetings with a, what's the new thing we're going to do? What can we add on to the relationship? Where is it the four of us working together can be better than the four of us working separately? So you had, from telecom to climate event preparation to cyber, to HADR, to vaccine production, to even fellowships. My sense is the more we do, the more ambitious we get, and the nice thing about Quad is at the end of the day, these are understandings. These are not in that sense treaty level commitments and relationships, but very effective nevertheless. So if, let us say, if there is we have been discussing ICET, critical emerging technologies in the Quad. We have been discussing supply chains in the Quad. In fact, even the Indo-Pacific Economic Framework initially came out of the Quad. It was meant to be a Quad event, and we actually suggested, why don't we make it larger? I do think the Quad is certainly a platform where the four countries can think much more seriously and practically about cooperation. On the second question, look on the FDI. Here's the issue. There's no question that India has become an easier place to do business. But we are also honest enough to accept there is a big scope for improvement out here. No country will ever be perfect, and we know we are far from that. Now, in different sectors, we have seen investments coming in. So I mentioned some notable ones today. So it is not like the FDI climate here is so difficult that countries can't come in. So here's my practical advice, because this is something which has also been a recurring conversation with our colleagues in Japan. Often we hear, there are problems in India. Answer is yes, there are problems. But if an investor says, you fix all the problems, then I will think whether I'm going to come there or not. That investor is going to be waiting a long while. Because there will be others who will say, okay, you fix some of the problems, I'll come and I'll keep talking on the basis of my experience what else you need to fix. So I think somewhere Japanese companies also need to take the plunge. After all, when they went to some other, when they went into Northeast Asia and Southeast Asia, it wasn't that conditions were perfect there. They went there and shaped the conditions. They had those conversations with those governments and with counterpart business. So I fully accept, as a government, we are willing to continuously engage Japanese business to know what it is that they would like, reasonably, obviously, to see done better in this country. We are open to that. But a conversation with someone who's not even here is not going to be a serious conversation. So we will also need to see signs of commitment. On the question on the Quad and clarity, the reason you folks may be confused is because the Quad is different from pretty much other arrangements which have happened, and maybe you're not adjusting to reality. That there is people generally think when countries come together, there must be a treaty, remember 3 out of 4 Quad members are members of alliance systems. So one of the criticisms which we often hear is, the Quad is not working because the Quad is not like an alliance system. It was never meant to be one. Now, there were people who said, the Quad's going to collapse because it had collapsed once before. But look at the actual record. So if there is lack of clarity about the Quad, it's not for the Quad to provide it, it's for the people to understand it. So maybe it's something you need to tell your colleagues and other people in those think tanks. Finally, on the students, look, it's very, I went to one of the main foreign language teaching universities in India. It's in Hyderabad. I asked them, in terms of student response, what is the most popular language? By far it was Japanese. Why is it so? Variety of reasons, cultural, young people are very influenced by what they hear and read and see about Japan, employability, etc. But here's the problem. The demand for Japanese is 5-6 times the number of seats that they have. Our real problem in India, whether it is business or whether it is language teaching, we've not been able to scale up. We have many places which teach Japanese. The numbers are just too small. So if you ask me right now, what's our big challenge? Our big challenge is scaling up. Yep. We have a broad footprint but not a deep footprint. And we are not continuously developing that footprint. And I regard today the limited number of students, the limited number of tourists, the limited number of interns, the limited number of mobility exchanges, I regard these as real constraints on the relationship. So I absolutely agree with you that I think we need to focus on students, and I think the Japanese side is thinking along very, very similar lines, at the Japanese government.
Yeah. Well, I think we've completely run out of time because I think the Minister has to be in Parliament. Thank you, Minister, for a fantastic start to the forum and for laying out our prerogatives for this forum, and I think we will be discussing pretty much everything that you've just spoken about. May I invite everybody to give a hand to the Minister? Thank you very much.